It's really all about taking a step-by-step, a risk-based approach, a phase-appropriate approach, but always having the end game in mind, so where you want to go. So you need to consider really what's the target in terms of commercialization. So what is the market you want to cover at the end of the day? And you have to keep this in mind from the beginning. But at the same time, you need to make sure that in your CMC strategy, you cover also regulatory aspects, quality aspects, manufacturing, process development aspects.
Hey, smart scientists. Welcome to another episode on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Many companies struggle to advance their scientific breakthroughs to clinical development and ultimately commercialization. To help you facilitate the transition from discovery into clinical testing, I invited Matthias Müllner, who is the CEO and co-founder of Bespark Bio, a company empowering viral vector-based medicines. And we are going to be talking about how you can develop a solid CMC strategy and how you can effectively leverage quality by design. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics at market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Welcome, Matthias, to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast.
Hi, David. Hi, good to be here. Thank you.
Matthias, share something that most people don't know about you.
From a professional perspective, so I studied molecular biology, and since my master's, I was working with viruses. Back then, I was really focused on scientific career at the university, and there was one thing I never wanted to do, which was ending up in industry. But as I got farther with my studies, the more and more I got interested in finding solutions to problems rather than understanding problems better. So I was more into applied sciences and also trying to commercialize those solutions. So it's when opportunities came along that I then, although I never wanted to, started to work in industry. And when I started to work in industry, there was another thing I never wanted to do, which was being self-employed and working in the service provider business. And look at me now. So that's has changed a bit. And now I'm here and I don't regret any choices or decisions I made. I took the opportunities at the right time, but wouldn't have expected this many years ago.
So what happened so that you changed your mind? I mean, now you're running your own company. You were providing solutions to the community. How did this all happen?
As I said, I was always interested in viruses. And once I was close to finishing my PhD, I really learned that my interest is more and more in finding those solutions and being closer to the patient. That's why when I planned my future, I was looking a bit outside of the box. I was looking for opportunities in the industry. And I really got the opportunity to work with a biotech company in the vaccine development. And this was exactly what I was looking for, like combining my knowledge on viruses and developing something meaningful, some solutions that can be provided to people and help bring more innovative technologies and medicines to the market at the end of the day.
And I'm curious, Matthias, because you've been in the industry for a while. In your experience, what are the main challenges that biotech scientists often encounter in bioprocess development and the manufacturing of biologics?
Yeah, I mean, this may not be true for all universities, but at least from my experiences, what I have learned is that there's a completely different skill set and mindset required when you want to, from a technical perspective or from a manufacturing perspective, process development perspective, want to bring a product into the clinics, onto the market. So often there's a lot of know-how on the research part, on the discovery part, on the scientifically driven, better understanding, mode of action, and those kind of things. But when it gets to the next steps of bringing these solutions, these technologies into the clinics, often you need a different mindset, you need a different skill set, a different know-how, different capabilities, and often this is not available. And bridging this gap from this perspective is often a big challenge, and also to accept that you may not be the right person to bring this forward, and probably you need to expand your network and bring in other people that help you to expand on that specific point.
So let's dive into this a bit further, because it's key that you manage a transition, let's say from the lab or from the discovery into the clinical studies and later on into large-scale manufacturing. It's such an important transition. So what are the main challenges biotech companies typically face?
It's similar. So again, these companies, either they are funded or they're looking for funding, so they have financial pressure to provide clinical data. So they're under pressure to move forward fast. But at the same time, they start kind of research project or lab developed process. So they really need to find solutions and ways to bring these technologies into a state where it can be manufactured and then actually used in clinical development. So there's a lack of knowledge, I'd say, a lack of know-how, also infrastructure and technology, because many developers, they have really strong focus on science, on discovery, but they don't have the infrastructure and capabilities to develop processes. They don't have the know-how. They don't have the know-how to develop CMC strategies and those kind of things. So these are really gaps they need to overcome from a technical perspective. And I would say this from the CMC side, from the process development side, the biggest challenge is also to identify locations where to manufacture. So contract manufacturers, to identify those, to audit those, to see are these the right fit. So it's really all about the whole CMC package that is often not there.
And sometimes we talk about the valley of death. Why is that the case?
So this is the transition, often the transition from late discovery or preclinical testing to clinical testing often is referred to be as the valley of death. And it's where a lot of projects and programs are held up for a long time or are even terminated. And there are several reasons for that. There can be financial reasons, as I indicated, because the companies, they don't get the funding, and you have to consider that process development, manufacturing, and bringing a process to a state where you can manufacture, and also the actual manufacture itself is quite expensive, so you need quite deep pockets for that. So it could be a financial reason for projects to fail at that state. It could be some kind of preclinical data not being sufficient, not having the right animal model. But there are also some process development CMC related aspects, like that you come up with a process which is not robust enough. You have not enough process understanding, so your GMP batch fails in a worst case scenario. Or you produce a product which is not safe enough, so your clinical trial application doesn't go through. So this is really a critical step in the life cycle of a product, of a novel product, that really needs to be solved for multiple angles. And one big problem could be the CMC part of that.
So it comes down to having a solid CMC strategy, right, Matthias?
That's exactly correct, yes. So really this CMC strategy or roadmap, or however you want to call it, that can become key, and then it's often overlooked because many companies, they don't really appreciate the problems that can come out of a not well-designed CMC strategy or roadmap. And it's really all about taking a step-by-step, a risk-based approach, a phase-appropriate approach, but always having the end game in mind, so where you want to go. So you need to consider really what's the target in terms of commercialization. So what is the market you want to cover at the end of the day? And you have to keep this in mind from the beginning. But at the same time, you need to make sure that in your CMC strategy, you cover also regulatory aspects, quality aspects, manufacturing, process development aspects. And you don't need to do everything from the scratch, but you really need to have the bigger part or the bigger picture in mind, and then take a step-by-step, phase-appropriated, risk-based approach and try to lay out all the requirements as soon as you can in your development pathway. And this can really help you to streamline your activities at the end of the day. And then you can make a risk-based decision on where you can cut some corners, where there's less risk associated, so in order to be a bit faster. And there's maybe some points where you probably should not cut corners, because this may fall on your toes later on and may lead to a termination after the valley of death. So once, for example, you get good clinical data and then you realize your process is commercially not viable, it's the cost of goods are too high for something. So this is something that you should assess to some extent with the knowledge you have upfront before you start your hands-on activities actually.
And what are I'd say, the key factors we should watch out for, and what are the potential pitfalls in this process of crafting a solid CMC strategy?
So I think key would be to start as early as you can. And of course, I understand and appreciate that not all the puzzle parts are there at the beginning and you don't have the full picture and the full understanding. But at least a lot of companies, they go to investors, they pitch their technology, they exactly know how big the market is and from a financial perspective. So if this is possible, you also should be able to look at from a more scientific point of view, really, where are we going to go? So is there a huge market? Is this a rare disease or whatsoever? So the sooner you put these things together and start crafting this CMC strategy is important. And then once you know where you want to go, then you can really make decisions on what is important at the beginning. So first things first. And you also need to look at what quality requirements come along with my product, what regulatory requirements come along. Are there any kind of regulatory requirements in terms of specifications, pharmacopoeia, or whatsoever? So you really should look at this, and then you can make decisions or educated decisions really on what you know and what you just assume. And once you go ahead, and this should be a kind of a living document, you should really then reassess this from time to time and see whether you're still steering into the right direction or whether you need to some readjustment. And maybe just to give you an example, it's like this cell banking topic, right? So for most of the viral vector-based products, you need a cell bank, so master cell bank, working cell banks, and so on. And if you don't really consider this at the beginning, you may end up in a situation where you have good data and everything is fine, but you realize your master cell bank is not going to support the market. And then you need to remanufacture, and then you may get into comparability problems. So, and if you really do this homework at the beginning, and in terms of time and costs, manufacturing a master cell bank, whether you do 200, 300, or 500 vials, does not really add any costs, or not much costs, and not much to the timelines. But it can save you a lot of troubles later on, and it also you need a 2-tier or 3-tier approach. So this would be an example where often better not to cut corners at the beginning, also when it comes to the qualification and the testing and the characterization of the cell banks or virus stocks, the same thing.
Yeah, establishing cell banks, that's such a great example, Matthias, because I have seen many difficult projects in my career just because of that. They started somehow not knowing all the ins and outs. And then later in the project, we had some big hurdles to manage. So yeah, this is definitely key to know exactly what you're doing and then make sure that you have all the data and everything is compliant. Because this leads me now to this question, because as a smaller company or startup, it can be very difficult to manage this because you don't necessarily have all the knowledge or you don't have the right people on board yet. What resources or support systems are available to make this process smoother?
That's really a key point. I completely agree and appreciate what you said, that this is knowledge, experience that is often not there. It's difficult to learn. Often, you can learn it from universities or whatsoever, but it's something that you need to experience. And that's something which is often not available in companies, as I indicated earlier. So on the long term, really the intention of a biotech should be to build this internal capacity, because this is really key that you have this internally. But on the short term, this is often not possible. So there are a couple of support systems out there that they can make use of. You have someone in the network, people in the network that can help you out, at least with the technical know-how or the strategic know-how. And then there's always consultants you can engage, dedicated CMC consultants that you can bring in at the beginning that help you to define, craft the CMC strategies. They may help you to identify the right manufacturer and so on and so forth. Of course, you could use CDMOs or CMOs, so contract development manufacturing organizations that can help you there. But often finding the right CDMOs can be a challenge. So it's often better to have someone in your corner who is maybe on your payroll that really is looking out for your personal or your company's interest, rather than relying on a manufacturer on that. So it's really the most efficient way, is really bringing in external capacity at the beginning and then slowly build internal capacity, hiring people with CMC know-how, building process development capability internally and know-how. And this can be, again, a process alongside your clinical development plan. But at the end of the day, this is where most of the investors or pharma companies that look to acquire or invest into companies look at: how is your CMC working? Is this a commercially viable project at the end of the day? And finally, there could be interactions with regulatory bodies seeking scientific advices. So if you have specific regulatory or quality related CMC questions, it's always maybe a clever idea really to engage with regulatory bodies soon and getting their advice as well.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, Matthias, is it's important to build this knowledge internally, but at the beginning it's challenging. And at that point, it may be a better strategy to pull some experts in very early on to make sure that you start on the right foot. And then as you progress, you build this expertise gradually and find the right people.
Exactly. And companies do this in other areas. Let's look at clinical development. Most of the companies, they go to a CRO and they bring in clinical experts to craft a clinical strategy. So if it's done in other areas, why don't do this in the CMC part as well?
Hey, smart biotech scientists. I hope you have enjoyed our conversation with Matthias Müllner, who is the CEO and co-founder of Bespark Bio, a company empowering viral vector-based medicines. What did you think about this episode? Please tell us by leaving a review. And coming up in part 2, we are continuing our journey to help you facilitate the transition from discovery into clinical testing. And perhaps you don't know where to start. And that's where we are coming in. We want to help you get clarity. And the first step is an easy step to take. Just book a free call with us using the link down in the show notes. And we're going to look at your specific needs and challenges, and we're going to make a plan, a very actionable plan, so that you have the clarity you need to facilitate the transition from discovery into clinical testing. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.